Real YouTube. Whatever, we'll go with it. Real YouTube is talk about Pokemon attacks. Today we are talking about Pokemon attacks I don't really like, for the most part. Not what I meant to do, but you know what? The intro is a force of its own, and I can't really control it anyway. Anyway, hello, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about Pokemon attacks. So, just like all Pokemon are not created equal, so too are not all Pokemon moves, attacks, whatever you want to call them. They're not created equal. Some are significantly better than others, and there's also moves that, in my opinion, are not super healthy for the game. Now, this is a little hard to define, I'm not going to lie to you. What does it mean for something to be healthy or unhealthy for the game? One thing that I personally look at is how much control, or how much variance does it introduce, and how much of that is within the player's control. For example, like moves with lower accuracy are typically less healthy for the game because it just creates a lot of variance. It's a big reason. I think it's inherently a lot of the reason behind why people don't like moves such as Focus Blast, and moves like that which have relatively low accuracy despite their high power trade-off. I don't think those moves are super healthy. However, certain moves favor the user, and certain moves favor the person they're used against. So while Focus Blast I don't think is a good move because it has low accuracy, it most of the time is only gonna punish the user of the move because its trade-off is not that. It's a high, fighting base power move, but like it's not especially strong beyond that. So actually, Focus Blast ends up hurting the person using it more often than the person on the receiving end of it. That's not the case for every move. Some moves really place a lot of burden on the person who they are used against, and therefore they're encouraged, like in some ways they're encouraged to be used by the user. So today I'm going to talk about the most toxic move, in my opinion. I have a couple honorable mentions, like, or maybe the things that people like would consider to be toxic, but I'm only going to talk about the number one in depth, I think. So yeah, with all that being said, let's jump into it. Yep, okay, cool. So here's some moves that I don't think are personally toxic, but other people might expect to be on this list. Follow Me, I think, is overall a relatively healthy move. It's balanced by the fact that its distribution is relatively limited, in my opinion. Togekiss, Indeedee, and Clefable and Clefairy are the only real users. And although it has tremendous support potential and it's a very, very, very powerful move, the ability to protect your partner, it's strong, but I don't think it's inherently unhealthy, right? Sometimes it can create mind games, and if you combine it with other moves, sometimes it can be problematic, but for the most part, I think it gives more options than it takes away. And although it's definitely something that needs to be respected in the current metagame and is overall a very, very strong move, like, the reason Pachirisu won Worlds is because it had Follow Me. It didn't, yeah, like, that was its primary strength, and so, yeah, so it's definitely a powerful move, but I don't think it's inherently unhealthy. It might be frustrating to play against at times, and certain uses of it might be very difficult to deal with. However, inherently, I don't believe it's unhealthy. You can stop it with Taunt, and you can stop it by KOing the user, and because the user, especially in this format, can't use both Follow Me and Dynamax, yeah, it's not super problematic. Another move that I know that people don't like is Parasong. I like Parasong a lot. I think it gives way to pretty intense and like interesting strategic thinking. Distribution is actually pretty good. Primarina, lots of good Pokemon on here. I'm not going to read them all out to you, although actually, yeah, I will. Primarina, Azumarill, Marowak, Gengar, Politoed, even Wigglytuff and Jigglypuff are okay, and then Cursula, of course, and Lapras and Gengar. So pretty much all the users are good Pokemon for the most part. Actually, yeah, like every user on here may have won a regional at some point. I wouldn't be surprised, except for Cursula and Celebi, who's not legal, but yeah, a very, very, very good move. I think it's really interesting. I don't personally think it's unhealthy or toxic. I think it has pretty clear counterplay, especially when you know that your opponent is using it. For example, like, there's two types of Parasong teams that utilize Parasong well. The first is where they just have it and no trapping effect. So basically, like, a team that has Politoed will oftentimes run when I run it, will often run Parasong because of the ability to, if you take 2 KOs and you're up in Pokemon, you can sometimes use Parasong and just win the game that way. And then there's more dedicated teams built around Parasong that make use of Shadow Tag, Arena Trap, sometimes trapping effects such as Gmax, Centiferno, and Gmax Sandblast from Centiskorch and Sandaconda respectively, and use Parasong as the main means of removing Pokemon from the opponent's side of the field. So the ideal situation is you use Parasong to take 2 KOs, using the trapping effects, and then once those 2 are gone, use Parasong to win the game. Those teams normally have a Shadow Tag user, 2 or 3 Parasong users, and then a bunch of Tech Mons and Support Mons around them. Although I know that it can be frustrating to play against, and it's kind of a weird way of looking at the game, I don't think it's inherently unhealthy. Parasong teams take a lot to get going. I think I'm the only player to win a regional with a Parastrap team. I'm not sure. I actually, don't quote me on that. I'm not positive if that's true, but I think I was definitely the first back in 2015, and I know that, like, even though the team was good, it required a good bit of luck, and yeah, like, it required a good bit of luck and, like, people being kind of unprepared for it. I think that at it's very difficult to use well, and I think there's pretty clear counterplay, especially, like, nowadays, because back in the day, ghost types couldn't switch out a shadow tag, so that was a big thing. In, like, Gen 5, like, so that was the big thing, there, where, yeah, Perish Trap was a lot worse then, or a lot stronger than, in theory, if it had all the same tools it has now. But yeah, with the ability of ghost types to switch out, with the prevalence of moves like U-turn and Volt Switch and now Flip Turn, although I don't think that's super popular, but it's there. With ghost type Pokemon being relatively common, actually, with Dusclops being on every team, well, not every team, but Dusclops being common, and now Alolan Marowak is introduced, and there's some other good Dragapult, of course. I don't think Perish Song or Perish Trap is inherently unhealthy. I'm actually talking about these more than I expected. We'll just talk about this one. I don't think Fisher's Rend is super unhealthy, given the only users are these two. I think if every Pokemon got this move, it would be pretty bad and would really discourage switching and defensive play, but since it's only Dracovish, and I guess Arctovish as well, I don't think it's that bad. I think it's a very strong move, but, yeah, I don't think it's that bad. Oko moves. So I think Oko moves are unhealthy. I don't think they're the most unhealthy moves in the game, because, like, although there's going to be some high variance times where, like, you click Sheer Cold once and it hits, or you click it twice and it hits, and you win games you have no business winning, over time, it favors the person that it's used against rather than the person who's using it. So, I'm talking about all Oko moves here. I think Sheer Cold is one of the best, although they did nerf it now because it's, yeah. Oh, wait. Huh. Yeah, because it doesn't work, against non-ice type Pokemon. Or it doesn't work against ice type Pokemon. I actually didn't, I thought it had accuracy raised in Hail. I didn't realize it was against non-ice type Pokemon. Okay, so regardless, all of the Oko moves have a drawback. Fissure and Horn Drill have immunities. Guillotine also has an immunity with, you know, Levitate blocking Fissure, and then Horn Drill and Guillotine not working on Ghost type Pokemon. Fissure, Horn Drill. I'm sure there's more that I'm forgetting about, but yeah, they all have some kind of drawback. Sheer Cold doesn't work against, or it doesn't work on ice types, and it's less effective against non-ice types. I actually did not know that was how it worked. I thought it was in Hail versus not in Hail. Wait, that doesn't even make sense. Oh, used by non-ice type Pokemon, not on non-ice type Pokemon. I misunderstood that. That makes more sense, but even still, what the heck? I definitely thought it was in Hail versus out of Hail, so that, I guess I learned something today. I'm gonna build a Sheer Cold team, but yeah. Oh, basically, although this move is inconsistent, it's still like viable in my opinion. And like, I don't know, people run it as a fourth move, as a tech move sometimes. Like, I ran it myself on Assaultfest Excadrill and the World Champions Invitational back when Sword and Shield first came out. Not Sheer Cold, I ran Guillotine, or yeah, I think it was Horn Drill, maybe Fissure. But over time, like, it's not consistent, and it doesn't favor, like, although, like, there can be some really, really unfortunate situations where you can be on the receiving end of this and lose because of it. Over time, it favors the player it's used against because it's only 30% accurate rather than the player who's using it. So although there are some high variance situations, I think in the end, people who use this move typically, not all the time, but typically tend to not have success with it over time just because of the nature of the probabilities. So definitely not healthy. I'm not defending it. I just say that that's the reason it's not the most toxic one, because it's not inherently, you know, like, it doesn't favor the user enough. Spore / Sleep Powder, these are one. Some people feel Sleep is broken. I'm gonna be honest with you. Sleep is broken. They have been continually nerfing Sleep for a long time, and it's still very, very strong. So current nerfs to Sleep are that there's only one good user of it, which is Amoonguss, Spore specifically. And so we've been using moves like Sleep Powder, which I would maybe argue is more unhealthy because there's more variance involved, so it feels worse when you get hit with it. But again, Spore is more broken in general because it doesn't miss. So yeah, you could make a case for Sleep Powder being more broken because you can use it on a fast Pokemon like Venusaur. Well, you could, and Butterfree, I guess, but mostly Venusaur. Like, the ability to have fast sleep, even though it's inaccurate, might even trump the ability for 100% accurate slow sleep. So that's kind of something you could probably argue. But yeah, basically, sleep is inherently volatile because of the way that the mechanic works. You have a 33% chance to sleep for 1, 2, or 3 turns. So sometimes you get a 1-turn sleep when you're, putting somebody to sleep was useless, more or less. Like, you just knock them out for 1 turn. And sometimes you'll get a 3-turn sleep on all your Pokemon and never be able to wake up and basically not be able to play the game. I don't have these moves as the #1 most broken thing because there is a lot of counterplay to sleep. There are items that inherently give you protection from from sleep, like Lumberry and Chestoberry. There are a lot of ways that you can stop sleep in addition to this. So grass types are immune to Rage Powder. There's Safety Goggles, which doesn't block all sleep, but does block powder moves, which also blocks Rage Powder, which is like Follow Me, but worse. So you can ignore it with, you know, there's multiple items you can use, Lumberry, Chestoberry, and Safety Goggles to some extent. And Terrains. So Terrains are a big nerf, and with the addition of Dynamax, the ability to have a faster user than the sleep user, and to go for like Max Lightning or Max Fairy and immediately protect all your grounded Pokemon from sleep is a big up. So I think there's a lot of good counterplay to sleep. I think it's very, very, very strong. Do not get me wrong. I think it's incredibly powerful, and I do think that it's volatile, and I think that maybe the mechanic could be reworked some, although it's already been reworked a fair bit. So yeah, but I don't think it's the most toxic thing in the game. I'm going to be honest. I think that there's things that are a lot worse than sleep. Even though it's frustrating to deal with, I think that we have enough counterplay and enough tools at our disposal that it would be unfair for me to tell you that Sleep Powder and Spore are, in my opinion, the most unhealthy. So now we're down to the kind of like the final 4 contenders. Let's talk about Dark Void, because that's the one. This would have been in Generation 6. This would have been number 1. This would have been number 1 for sure. Dark Void had an 80%, 85% accuracy. 80% accuracy, and it puts both targets to sleep. It was only usable on Smeargle, because Darkrai was the only user of it, and so Smeargle via Sketch could learn it. It more or less, in my opinion, I wouldn't say ruined, but significantly hurt 2016 as a format. Dark Void Smeargle was just so volatile. It's especially on Smeargle with Moody, which has also been nerfed. It was so unhealthy for the game. When you click Dark Void, you're just like you're just rolling dice. That's the truth. Like, because you're dealing with 80% accuracy on each target that you want to hit, and then in addition to that, you're dealing with sleep turn. So, you know, you could miss both, you could hit both and get double 3-turn sleep. There's a ton of volatility there. And it took a lot of intelligent counterplay and a lot of, yeah, because that was also before Terrains. So it was really broken. I'm just gonna say it. And the thing is that the longer Smeargle stuck around on the field, the more chances it got to be like annoying with Moody. So like, I remember watching a match, I think it might have been Billa versus somebody, where like, he made like the perfect turn 1 read where like he led Kangaskhan Landorus. This is actually 2015. He leads Kangaskhan Landorus into like Smeargle something, and turn 1 like both Pokemon on the opponent's side protect, and Billa switches Kangaskhan out, side U-turns to reset the fake out pressure, but the person gets speed boost on Smeargle because, yeah, so basically allowing them to it was something where like, I don't remember the exact situation, but it was some reason where like the speed boost was basically the one thing that needed to not happen, or maybe it was evasion. I'm missing some details because I know there's things missing here. But yeah, he definitely, like, I don't know. What even happened? Yeah, it was definitely protect, read, side U-turn, reset, fake out, but I don't remember why the speed boost mattered. I don't remember. Anyway, yeah, so the longer the Smeargle stuck around in the field, the more chances it got to be annoying with Moody, and it wasn't just speed and bulk that was annoying, it was also accuracy and evasion. So almost every stat except for the offenses benefited Smeargle situationally, and a lot of it just benefited Smeargle like regardless. And the drops, only a few stat drops would like actually hurt Smeargle, like sometimes speed and sometimes like accuracy most of the time. And with Focus Ash, it was really difficult to remove. So in old Dark Void world, I would say number 1 most broken move. It was not healthy at all. However, they nerfed Dark Void down to 50% accuracy, and they said Smeargle can't learn it anymore. So I think it only needed the latter nerf. I feel kind of bad for Darkrai because VGC kind of got Darkrai ruined. Like, you can't run Darkrai anymore because, I don't know, like, Sleep is really strong and Darkrai kind of feels like it needs it. Maybe it doesn't need it, I don't know. But, yeah, so it's not broken anymore because, I mean, it's not going to be VGC legal. Darkrai's the only user, and Darkrai's like, not VGC legal. So Dark Void's not a contender. Number 2... Okay, let's talk about Geomancy. I think that so Geomancy is only usable by Xerneas. However, in the current format, Xerneas isn't legal. So I'm not going to include Geomancy in this list. I'm just going to say that if Xerneas was legal, I think I'd rather have Geomancy removed than any other move. I think, personally. I think Geomancy Xerneas ruins entire formats. Or I don't have that much of a problem with Geomancy under the condition that Power Herb doesn't work with it. I think that's the real thing about Xerneas. The ability to double your attack, special attack, or sorry, special attack, special defense, and speed from one move when you're already base 99 stat is powerful, to say the least. And when your ability gives you a life orb boost to your fairy type moves, no, absolutely not. So if Geomancy was in the current format, I would say Geomancy number 1. However, Geomancy is not in the current format, so where does that leave us? Well, there's 2 left that I want to talk to you about. So the second, number 2 on this list for me, even though it's not really a list, it's just kind of other things, Rockslide. This is one of the most... You could make a contention that this should be number 1 as well. So, Rockslide. For a while, this move has been kind of like a meme within VGC. You might be kind of surprised to see that. So, if we look at just kind of the base things here, we see it's only 90% accuracy. It's a spread move, but it's a spread move. In VGC, you get a 75% reduction... Or, sorry, 75%. You get a reduction on your moves and their spread moves as long as they target both 2 targets. So what that means is that Rockslide most of the time is a 56 base power move on both targets and its rock type. Why is that strong? It doesn't sound inherently strong when you just look at these things. The expected value of this move is like relatively low, right? When you consider it's not a super high base power move on its own, the spread reduction makes it even weaker, and the accuracy is only 90%. And you're hitting both targets, it means you only have an 81% chance to hit both targets. So why is it so strong? Well, if you look at the secondary effect, it causes flinching, and it doesn't cause flinching with like a 10% effect. It actually causes flinching with a 30% effect, meaning the odds of not flinching from the move are what, 1 minus 0.7 times 0.7? Is that right? I haven't done probability in a while. I haven't even played Pokemon in a while. Wait. You have a 70% chance of not flinching, so in order to not flinch on both Pokemon, aka the odds of flinching one Pokemon is 1 minus 0.7 to 0.7, which is 0.51. So unless I've done things wrong, which is possible, I have my brain tiny now, but I think there's a 51% chance to flinch, not factoring in accuracy, but if it connects on both targets, you have better odds of flinching one of the Pokemon than not flinching. And when you put it like that, imagine you have a fake out like every other turn, effectively. You play Rockslide every turn. And that's not factoring in opponent's accuracy. It's not factoring in Thunder Wave or Swagger. This move has been very, very unhealthy in my opinion. It's very spammable as well because it's a spread move. It doesn't do a lot of damage, sure, but like Rock is like a decent offensive typing, and it's also kind of like a last resort move. In addition to all of that, it has pretty good distribution. So Pokemon like Landorus T, for example, are one of the prime examples of users of this move. But even Pokemon like Tyranitar, if you can get at the speed advantage, can be very dangerous with this. However, I think the number 1 reason that I'm not putting this thing at number 1 is because of Dynamax's introduction. Now, if you Dynamax a Pokemon, you can no longer flinch. That is, most people recognize that it's good counterplay to Fake Out, but it also is very good counterplay to moves like Rockslide, and other moves of like Iron Head that can flinch you, and saying basically like, hey, if you flinch me, I might lose here, so I have this defensive tool that I can always use it. It's a lot harder to stifle your opponent's momentum because Rockslide into most Dynamax Pokemon isn't going to be doing a ton of damage. It depends on the user, of course. Like Tyranitar can still do damage with it, but for the most part, you're not using Rockslide primarily for the damage output. You're mostly using it because it's a solid spread move that has a really good secondary effect. So, I don't think Rockslide is healthy, I'll be honest. I think the flinch chance should be lowered to 20 or 10%. Even a 10% reduction would have pretty big echoes because it would change the odds of flinching if you hit both from 51% to 36%, if I've done my math correctly. So, yeah, if it was lowered, I think it would be a lot healthier. But just the addition of adding a mechanic that means that you can guarantee that you won't flinch for the turn, I think is pretty good counterplay. So that's why Rockslide's not number 1. Just looking at my list, making sure I didn't miss anything. Cool. Okay, so the move that is actually, after all this time, the most toxic move in the game is this thing. So this move can't be... No, I'm just kidding. Ally Switch. This is my opinion. This is an opinion video, not a fact video. Okay, it's just my opinion. This thing is not good for the game, I'll be honest with you. Nobody wins with Ally Switch. I've used it a couple times, I'm terrible at using it, I've managed to get it wrong every single time I click it. So of course, that's why I'm saying this, I'm biased, I'm not good at using it. But no, the truth of the matter is that this move is just pure variance and does nothing for the game, right? It's just pure variance. Like, if you click Ally Switch, like, I don't know. Like, once your opponent knows you have Ally Switch, it just forces these really uncomfortable mind games of, like, you could never be safe, knowing like which slot you're going to target, and like at that point it's not a read anymore. It's like there's not optimal play to counter Ally Switch a lot of the time. Some of the time there is, right? Like using a double up into certain slots can be solid to cover it, or you know, using strong moves into both slots. But oftentimes when you're facing against Ally Switch, like there are times where like you're going to come down to saying like this game is a literal coin flip on whether my opponent Ally Switches or not, and that I don't think is healthy for the game. Ally Switch inherently wasn't bad for a number of years. It actually didn't pick up, like if you look at Gen 6, there were a couple users, but they were all pretty garbage. Like, they gave it to me Yanchao. Cofagrigus is good, but not good in Gen 6. Gardevoir, like there weren't really any good users. However, in Generation 7, they actually added it as a move tutor move. And so if we look through this, you can see the list has expanded significantly. Like, pretty much every Pokemon gets it. Even Pokemon like Stakataka, just, like, looking randomly. And non-psychic Pokemon like Delmise and Naganyadel, and Comfey. And, like, all these Pokemon, just everything. Like, why does Genesect get Ally Switch? Why does Golurk get Ally Switch? You know? Why does Archeops get Ally Switch? It doesn't make any sense to me. But basically, they gave it to a ton of Pokemon. And with the wide... Like, it was fine in Generation 6 because the Pokemon using it were bad. But in Generation 7 and now Generation 8... the distribution, they actually made it a TR. So the distribution is so incredibly high that, like, there's a couple really dangerous Pokemon that get it. I want to highlight Dusclops because Dusclops is insane natural bulk, and the fact that it doesn't necessarily need all of its moves, other than, like, Trick Room and Nightshade, and then the last two are kind of personal preference, makes it very difficult to deal with. When you're dealing with frail Pokemon using Ally Switch, the story's a little different, right? Like, you know, okay, well, you know, your Gardevoir's using Ally Switch, but I have strong enough moves that I can, like, you know, cover, like, I can knock it out quickly. It's not going to stick around for a while, or I can cover the Ally Switch because you don't have the bulk to take these moves together. But with Dusclops, it's a whole different story. And because of the wide distribution, so many times when you're looking at a Pokemon, you have to play the game of, does this thing have Ally Switch or not? Whenever you're seeing any kind of support Dragapult set, you have no idea if it has Ally Switch, right? So Dragapult Colossal, Dragapult Cobalion, Dragapult Terrakion, Dragapult Arcanine with justified beat-up stuff, you're always wondering if they have Ally Switch, and I don't think that's inherently healthy for the game because it forces people to make poor decisions. It doesn't force people to do anything, but it encourages poor play, in my opinion, and it's just pure variance, and it's not skill-based, in my opinion. Like, once your opponent knows you have Ally Switch, sometimes I will say it is skill-based. Sometimes there's good counterplay that you can do that will cover Ally Switch and will allow you to, regardless of the Ally Switch or not, let you cover the options. But that isn't always possible depending on your position, and so to be in a position where the move is just, like, there, and, like, you know that it's there, and they know that, like, it feels truly like a 50-50, whether or not they click it. Now, it's not always a 50-50, because I do think people overuse that term, but sometimes it will just be, like, a coin flip. Like, okay, if I attack the right slot here, I win, and if I attack the wrong slot, I lose, and, like, they have Ally Switch, so, yeah. Yeah, so I don't think it's inherently healthy for the game. In fact, I think it's extremely unhealthy and toxic for the game. I don't think it promotes good gameplay. I don't think anybody benefits from it. From a strategic sense, like, obviously some players make better use of it than others, and maybe people feel differently about this. Maybe people feel like Ally Switch is a really healthy move for the game, and yeah, like, that it's really good and promotes good gameplay in a way that I cannot see. But in my opinion, I think it's pretty unhealthy, and I think it would be really good if we didn't have it in the format, and I think it makes Pokemon that are already problematic extremely difficult to deal with. And part of Pokemon is determining what moves your opponent has and making inferences before you see them. But I think that isn't necessarily such a... I don't value that skill so much that I think the inclusion of Ally Switch is worth it. Because, when, like, that's a valuable skill. Like, oh, does Dusclops have Haze? Or, like, oh, does it have Bulldoze? Or, like, I've seen Bulldoze, which is the last move. You know, Nightshade, Trick Room, Bulldoze. Is it going to be Pain Split? Is it going to be Will-O-Wisp? Like, you know. But when that move has the potential to just, like, instantly win or lose the game in many cases, like, depending on if you haven't seen it, I think it's pretty cheesy. So, and even when you know it's there, it's not like, okay, now I know it's there, I can prepare for it. It's like, well... sometimes you can prepare for it, but oftentimes you're just like, well, I hope they don't click it, or I hope they do click it. Yeah, so, I don't know. That's my opinion. I think Ally Switch is the worst move in the game, and I think that if I could personally remove one move, it would be Geomancy, just so, for, like, as an investment for the future. But right now, just if I could remove one move for this format, Ally Switch every day of the week. I think it's extremely unhealthy. So, yeah. That's my thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know what you think the most unhealthy move is, because maybe I kind of just did a cursory glance. I think I used that word correctly. Words aren't really my strong suit. But yeah, I just did kind of a quick glance through the moves, and more or less, like, made a list of things that I thought people would talk about, but I very well might have missed some. It was a pretty quick glance through, so I just knew what my number one wanted to be. So yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.